next in line. Lower class and social slime, they don't matter. Genocide, sick from water, sick from air. Making money, they don't care. Caesar shit, force of air. Fuck them back, it's only for they bomb. They shoot, they kill, they massacre, rape. They burn the kids, no one makes countries. Laugh to your face, fight and die, 'cause God forgives. Selling lies and buying time, killing people next in line. Lower class and social side, they don't matter. Genocide, sick from water, sick from air. Making money, they don't care. See their shit, force a bear. Fuck them back, that's only fair. They bomb, they shoot, they kill, they massacre, rape. They burn the kids, no one leaves countries. Lie to your face, fight and die, 'cause God forgives. Yeah. Coming back around again.
Okay, good afternoon. This is your host, Ron Stevens. This is Game On, and this is Sunday, the 28th of June, 2015. Just before we get into the show and my guest, I just want to say that that intro song, which I failed to mention before, was co-written and performed by a friend of mine, and it's called God Forgive. And I just wanted to get that out. Friend Angus Stark, who's quite a talented musician and songwriter. Anyways, on today's show, I am just pleased as punch to have Tom DeWeese with us, president of the American Policy Center. Now, it would be nice if when I said the name Tom DeWeese, it would be like Justin Bieber. Everybody would know the name, and that's unfortunately maybe not as true as it should be. Tom has been working diligently for over 2 decades now to bring to light or shine a light on the subject of Agenda 21. And he's done an incredible amount of work with some of his fellows. Anyways, he is the president of the American Policy Center, and he's one of the leading advocates of individual liberty, free enterprise, private property rights, personal privacy, back to basics education, American sovereignty and independence. Now, in today's world, that almost sounds like a radical idea. But that's what our forefathers came to these lands, North America, for, was to get out from under the feudal system and the tyranny, knowing full well that their families could never advance under that system. So what we've witnessed over the last particular 100 years has been basically the demise of those ideas. And it's because of people like Tom that we have a chance to right the ship, if you will, because as far as I'm concerned, the ship is capsized and we need to get it righted again and get on the right path again of independence and individual liberties and individual privacy in that. So anyways, I'm pleased to bring Tom on today. Tom, are you there?
I'm here. Good to be with you.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you here. So, you know, I've been at this hard now for the last 10 years, 7 days a week. And you've been at it for over 2 decades now. And I'm just curious. I know what drives me, but I'm just curious as to what's driving you. And I think the first sentence that I read there is pretty much it.
Yeah, actually, I've been an activist for these causes since I graduated from high school in 1967, and I have, through that time, been involved in college campus wars and ran for the state legislature and so forth. Actually, the reason I got involved was because I got my first paycheck out of high school, and they took taxes out of it, and I wasn't old enough to vote. And I said, wait a minute, that's taxation without representation. And so I started an organization called Youth for Fair Government to work to lower the voting age. And that's where I started. But
well, that's amazing. What year would that have been?
That would have been 1969 that we did that. Actually, the first speech that I ever gave in my life was a testimony before the Ohio Senate for a bill that I was partially responsible for getting there. So
that's amazing, and we must be almost the very same age here because and I don't know why it is. Maybe you can explain that. When I was in high school, it had started way before high school, but I was always the kid that was always asking questions of my teachers and everybody else. Something never set right with me. It seemed like we were playing some kind of weird game and we weren't supposed to know what it was or something. We're just supposed to hush up and don't question anything. And the same thing. I actually thought about running in elections at a very, very early age. I didn't do it till I was like 50 or better. But it got to the point where I just kind of turned my eye away from it as well and went to work, right? And then when they started putting the windmills in around here and people started whining and complaining about it, I'd already had that background from '74, so I already understood what this renewable energy thing was all about. So we kind of have pretty much the same background. I wish that I had done what I really knew I should have been doing inside the whole time. Now I have gone on behalf of people to solve problems with government and that before, and been successful with it. And but I think what we're trying to do is get people to become active. People would like you to or me to go and fix their problems for them. And that's not going to fix the problem we find ourselves in today, is it?
No, we're not big enough to do it by ourselves. But it's interesting what you just said about you because you had background in something, you could see what was happening. Well, because I was in those campus wars in the '60s, where these radical leftists were trying to shut down campuses, they were advocating communism and everything. It has made it so easy for me today to see the same exact ideas becoming policy, and I can recognize it immediately, and I'm able to jump on it and get into it. People say, well, how do you know this? How's come you're aware of this and other people aren't? I mean, because I lived it my whole life and I saw it from the very beginning, and the words are the same. I've got documents that show the whole issue of calling us all racist because we disagree with them. That started in the '60s. The environmental movement started in the '60s. Hate government, hate capitalism and so forth. That all started then. The whole transition of education started then. There's nothing new here. It just when all those radicals in the streets who were college students or younger at the time, when that was all over, people thought, well, that's just over. They went home. They didn't. They went into business, they went into government, and they went into the education system. And all three of them have been the main road to putting those exact same policies in place. And today, 40 years later, here we are with it staring us in the face.
That's what I noticed when I left school. It was I got to the realization that I wasn't going to learn anything, not of any use, and that I was wasting my time. My attitude was knowledge is everything's written down someplace, right?
Yeah.
All you have to decide is you want that knowledge and go find it, and that's what you find in those big dusty old reference books and that. Yeah, it was basically the same thing for me. And people say, how do you know all this stuff? Well, because I made myself know it. Something wasn't right. But I also exactly what you just said about what happened after the '60s, and that was a concocted change out as well. These are always events to move somewhere else, and exactly what I was telling people way back in the early '70s is that see, because remember in the early '70s, they always bring out these movies. There was that movie called Network about media. And it told you right there that the media had been amalgamated, if you will. And back in the early '70s, you had this late '60s, early '70s, you had this real environmental push. But what happened was that there was still too much independent media out there to push back or shine a light on things. So that's when they went and bought up all the media. And the environmental movement actually got a little bit quiet at that time, and is exactly what you said. Those people, those radicals, ended up in business and government and bureaucracies and the universities.
Yeah.
And they got kind of quiet and pushed their message into the students. In other words, they indoctrinated all these people into that system, and now they've come out with it again.
Well, getting control of the children's minds is number one.
Yes.
It's been said that freedom can only last for one generation if you begin to demise it, and that's what happens. They've gotten a hold of actually now several generations of people who went through the education system who have not learned anything about history. What freedom is about, these kind of things that you and I advocate that used to be mainstream that are now, as you said earlier, radical. And, you hear kids today who just go crazy over people who talk about free enterprise and individual liberty and all that. You're talking racist stuff. You're talking these evil capitalists that just preyed on people and all that. That's what you hear because that's exactly what they're taught. You get a hold of the children and you change their minds, and you begin to create what I call a global village idiot. And it's not their fault. They don't know any better because they haven't been taught.
Well, yeah, when I had to even talk to lawyers and government people, and they seem to go, "What are you saying?" And I'm saying, understand this: you came up through an education system, okay, where you were told things that you didn't check out. Okay, all people want when they go through school is to get their degree or get through the next grade or whatever, and they're happy to sit there and just regurgitate whatever's told to them, never questioning where it came from or what the purpose of it is. And so that indoctrination process gets pretty easy. I was actually talking to a young guy, 17 years old, the other day, who was asked to leave school because he was becoming a disruption. Not because he was throwing chalk at the teacher or something, because he was asking extremely pertinent questions.
Yeah.
So they asked him to leave and put him on a correspondence course.
Yeah. The education system used to be a place where ideas were exchanged, and you could debate things, you could come up with ideas, somebody else could say, no, I don't believe that, and you could go back and forth, especially on college campuses. Now we have free speech zones. You're only allowed to have those ideas in this little area right here. That's insanity.
I went to a thing years ago, and somebody said, "Oh, this is the free speech protest zone." And I'm going, "Excuse me, what are you talking about?" Well, they allow us to speak over here or protest over here, and I'm going, "Did you hear what just came out of your face?"
Yeah. My friend Michael Bednarik, who was the Libertarian Party candidate for president in 2004. Told me that one day he went on a college campus to speak, and they had him in this huge lecture auditorium, and there were like 10 people there. And he said, "Can't we go somewhere else where you're a little more intimate so we can talk?" And they said, "Oh, no, this is a free speech zone." He said, "I've got news for you. Anywhere I go is a free speech zone."
Yeah, but this is what people, like you said, you get them when they're children, and you train them to follow these so-called policies that are given them to follow, and they just follow them. They don't seem to question or buck against them or anything else, and it's very fearful. But on the upside, and I'm hoping you've noticed the same thing I've noticed. I'm really hoping that. And then we'll get into all about Agenda 21 and that. But um, I actually had the chief inspector of the police here call me up at home and tell me would tell me what my problem was, and I thought that was very nice of him, actually, because if I have a problem, it'd be nice for someone like that to explain it to me, I guess. But he called me at home and told me that my problem was that I was diametrically opposed to what 99% of the community thought. So basically, what he's saying is that if I do not think the same as what they have set down to be the thought perimeters, then I'm a problem. And I found that rather ridiculous. But I mean, I don't even know if this guy, I mean, how does this guy phone somebody up and say, your problem is you're diametrically opposed to what 99% of the community thinks? Well, obviously, the guy wearing the suit making the call don't think very well, or that would have never come out of your mouth. Or you're just an agent for something you don't understand. And that's what I find about a lot of these people. They don't understand what they're even pushing.
There's a lot of fear there. Because they don't have original thoughts. They have been through this indoctrination system, which, by the way, is based on behavior modification to change the attitudes, values, and beliefs of the children so that they're all in lockstep. And so they don't know to question things. They're not to question authority. They're to accept what's thrown at them. And when they hear somebody like you or me who challenges that, it scares them. And so they've got to put it down, and that's what happens. One of the ways that when I speak, I talk about this, having everything in lockstep. If you go back in history, just as an example, Alexander the Great and Thomas Jefferson lived in essentially the same world. And what I mean by that is the way their transportation was horse, exactly the same. The way they lit their homes was candlelight, exactly the same. And, there were changes in human society as we went along, but essentially the world moved at exactly the same pace. And then along comes, in the late 1800s, along comes three people: Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, and the Wright brothers. Those four people changed the world. Suddenly, things got faster, things got brighter, life changed. And that messed up a well-ordered society that these guys are now trying to put on us. They don't ever, ever, ever again want to have a Thomas Edison, a Henry Ford, or Wright brothers to mess up the well-ordered society they're trying to put together. And if they see that light anywhere, they need to extinguish it immediately.
Yeah, they don't want I mean, it's just a control grid, and they don't want to lose control of what they've built. We have this. What I was trying to say though is what I've seen in the last 2 years, basically, is that people are starting to question more, and I equate that to the negative impact on their personal lives, as more money is being taken out of their pocket all the time. Through higher, utility rates, taxes, food bills, gas bills, all this kind of stuff, and they are feeling pressured and pushed against the wall, and it's being very difficult for them now to turn a blind eye to something else, because they're involved in it now, and so I'm trying to encourage everyone that this is a time that we have the job to do of explaining to people why they're being pushed against the wall now.
Once people begin to feel it themselves, that's when we begin to make progress.
Right.
A lot of this stuff happened behind the scenes, under the radar, for decades. And it was being put in place, but people weren't feeling the impact on it. When we first started, I know we're going to talk about Agenda 21, when we first started talking about it, sending out the warnings, was, even before 1992, before it was even introduced, we started to send out warnings of what was going on, and it was just dead silence in cities. The people who we worked with for almost 2 decades, almost exclusively on this, were people who were ranchers, farmers, timber people, mining people, who were the first targets of this and understood it. But the average person across the country in cities didn't feel it, and so it was falling on deaf ears there. But that, as you're saying, now people are feeling it and they're starting to question it, and that's why I feel positive in a lot of ways that we can make progress and we can begin to turn it around because people are feeling the heat of it, and that's how revolutions begin, as people begin to fight back as they feel it.
Yeah, and what people have to understand is, and I think that's something that is lost in the cities to a point, because you have so many renters in cities, is that we have the right of property, but property is not the land. Okay, it's an investment product. That's all a property is, and the fact is that we who have our feet on the land possess the land, and possession is 90% of the law. And I think what we need to do is realize that these are our lands. This is our country. These countries, the United States and America, or America and Canada and Australia and Britain and all these places, the land, these countries belong to the people. They don't belong to a bunch of jackass politicians or lawyers or bankers. This is our land, and we have a responsibility to it and each other who lives on the land. And Agenda 21 is the eradication of any idea that you have any control over anything on those lands. And without that control over our own lands, well, we're definitely back in the feudal system. And the feudal system now, instead of the kings and queens, rolls into this international body at the UN.
It is time to start treating property owners like owners.
Mm-hmm.
Not children, not chattel, not something to just be controlled. Everybody do it this way. And that's what's happening with these regulations, is that they are coming in one size fits all, and we will determine what you can do on your property, when you can do it, how you can do it, or if you can do it. And yet, we're supposed to be the owners of it. And this is something we're really starting to pound into this. People have got to understand that. They're owners.
Well, what they're doing up here, and I imagine doing the same thing in America, what they're doing up here now is they're trying to coerce the native people into because their land claims in that are not saleable, okay, and they're trying to coerce them into recategorizing it, I guess, as property or something, so that they can cut resource deals or sell property or this or that, and it's a classic case of taking the leadership and turning the leadership against their people. Hats off to the native people, because an awful lot of them, at least here, have caught on to the idea of what their leadership is up to. And you know as well as I do, this whole thing of Agenda 21, really, I mean, it speaks to the idea of pitting people against people for supposed different causes. But all of this confusion and chaos that's going on, where they turn neighbor against neighbor and so on and so forth, or race against race, and that people are people. Okay, people don't run around hurting people. These people have been set up as agents of confusion in that. So while everybody's running around fighting amongst themselves, the guys at the top are sitting up there looking down at the chaos they've created, which is leading everybody to where they want them to go, and they're laughing their asses off at us.
Well, as we've just experienced in the United States in the last 5 days, they have absolutely done cultural genocide on us. Everything that, our history, tradition, everything has been turned upside down and done on an official level through the Supreme Court, through Congress, and people are just reeling here. They just, I mean, we don't know which way to go. How do you turn? Where do you go?
It's a mess, isn't it?
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
but just and then we'll get into Agenda 21. But when you spoke about education before, what I realized about education, you see, when you went to school, you were taught things, and they're still implanted in your brain. Okay, as did I, and the generation that came after me, and that one as well. And what really threw me was the revisionist that actually goes on. I saw a clip of a guy down in Austin, Texas, uh, asking students at the university their feelings and thoughts on the 50th anniversary of the assassination of John Kennedy. And this reporter was freaked out because he couldn't find anybody at the campus that knew Kennedy had been assassinated. You know, they go, "What are you talking about?" And he says, "Well, you know, and the students are going, well, the only thing we know about him was that he died while he was in office."
Seriously. Wow.
Yeah, and so you know, when your child goes to a school, you have to pay some serious attention to what's going on there.
Well, you see now with the turmoil that's going on here, it is very obvious of the lack of history, the lack of knowledge that people in the streets have. I mean, for crying out loud, the other day there's actually serious talk of removing the Jefferson Memorial from Washington, D.C. because he was a slave owner. I mean, this is how ridiculous and how crazy it has gotten. And you know, they want to remove him from the money, the founding fathers, everything, completely eradicate America's history. And of course, what goes with that is the philosophy of that this nation was founded on, the ideals of freedom, and we completely do, you know, have control. Watch what happens when there is a revolution in a country. When that revolution wins, the revolution's heroes, the revolution's ideas are what take over everything. And we have already here, you know, we've got Rachel Carson high schools and Cesar Chavez.
Are you serious?
Huh?
Are you serious?
Yes.
Rachel Carson high schools?
Yes. Yeah. Actually, it's a junior high school, or a middle school that's here in Chantilly, Virginia. And there are other places. And, you know, I contend that what we're fighting now is the third American Revolution, not the second. Because the second American Revolution, because right back when we started talking about, was in the 60s. And even though people didn't realize that there was a revolution and it won. And we are now in the midst of that, the fallout from that, or you know, what they put in place. And we're trying to fight a third American Revolution now to overturn the second American Revolution. That's what it's about.
You see, this is getting back to curriculum, Rachel Carson School. Now, this kills me because so many environmentalists say Rachel Carson's Silent Spring was a turning point in their life. Give me a break. But what you'll never hear an environmentalist state, and I'm sure they don't show that book at the Rachel Carson Public School, or middle school, whatever it is a book that she produced in the 50s, which was The Sea Around Us, which is a very good explanation of the cyclical currents causing climate change. And it was a very big study that she did, and she went through all the Danish, Norwegian studies, because, you see, the ice all melted back then. Not in the 50s, but back in the 1800s, I think it was. I remember specifically in school when I was a child that the melting of the Northwest Passage, everybody was cheering that on when the ice was melting. Hot damn, man! A short route to the east. This is wonderful. Now it's a catastrophe. So you know, they pick and choose the propaganda that they use.
Of course they do.
Yeah, and the rest of it, people have no knowledge of.
Yeah,
that's
you know, my point is that when you have a revolution, then you begin to tear down the monuments of the old and put up your own. And what we're seeing now, you're talking about tearing down the Jefferson Memorial, and next will be the Washington Monument, and all that. To tear down the monuments of the old, we have a revolution here. I mean, we just had the White House put in rainbow colors the other day.
I almost threw up. I was dealing with this Confederate flag with some folks, right?
Yeah.
And, I said, what you're witnessing right in front of your very eyes is revisionist history.
Yep.
But everyone seems blind to it.
Mm-hmm.
Rainbows. I mean, I had to put on dark glasses last night to sleep because I was on the internet yesterday, and everywhere I went was rainbows, right?
Yes, I know.
Yeah, they're full bore now, and that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned because as long as people understand, that's our job, is to get them to understand what exactly is going on, so that they're not fearful of it, and they can work with clear heads, right, and see through the fog that's being put in front of them. But when good old Kissinger, or not Kissinger, but Rockefeller said way back in '99, he stated our window of opportunity has already begun to close, and that's been my main driver, really, is that you get it, that you're going to have to start pushing hard. And the harder you push, the more people you alert. And the more people you alert, the less chance you have of fulfilling your dream.
Yeah.
I
totally agree. Agree.
So let's do Agenda 21, my friend.
Okay. What's that?
Well, according to the CAO here, he's never heard of it, although you can go to the CAO's training sites who train all city managers and CAOs on how to implement Agenda 21, but when I had an hour-long conversation with him in his office, he adamantly kept saying that he never heard of it.
Yeah, this is what we're faced with day in and day out. The interesting thing is that back in the beginning, in the 90s, they were very, very excited about that. I mean, first of all, Agenda 21 came about in 1992. It was first introduced to the public at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992 at a UN conference there. And this was written over several years. It wasn't just a document that they just put out and said, here's this thing. It was a culmination of a bunch of such meetings and other documents. And these non-governmental organizations, the Nature Conservancy, the Sierra Club, the Audubon Society, on and on and on, there's thousands of them. They work behind the scenes in the UN to put these documents together. They write them. They put their own personal agendas in there, and then they introduce them at these conferences, and then they get world leaders to sign on to them, and they do this over and over again, and that's what Agenda 21 was done. They had 50,000 delegates at this Earth Summit, and you had 179 world leaders. George H.W. Bush was there, and they introduced this document along with a few others called Agenda 21, Agenda for the 21st Century. And what it really calls for is a reorganization of human society based on the idea of protecting the environment, and it's what's called a soft law policy. It's not a treaty. It's not a law in itself. It is a suggestion, but it has all these pieces and parts to it, and world leaders like George H.W. Bush signed it, said, yeah, okay, we want America to have this. And they called it a comprehensive blueprint for changing American society. And I've got document after document where they call it a comprehensive blueprint. And I've got EPA documents. I've the American Planning Association, one of the largest planning groups in our country, called it a comprehensive blueprint. And on and on and on like that, until a few of us began to try to put a spotlight on it and get people to see what this was about. By the early 2000s, all of a sudden, all these people who had called it a comprehensive blueprint started saying, what? Never heard of it. What are you talking about? Now, think back recently where so many people went suddenly dumb. Golly, there's a guy named Jonathan Gruber who big videos came out last fall showing him talking about the Obama health care policy, saying the reason we got it through was because of the stupid American people didn't know what we were doing. And all of a sudden, this guy who had been called for so long, Nancy Pelosi had introduced him as the expert. He'd been to the White House 40-some times. He was the guy who put it all in. All of a sudden, they went, never heard of him. Who is this Jonathan Gruber? Exactly the same thing they're doing with Agenda 21 today, denying it even exists and attacking anyone who talks about it. And what I love about it is that I'm attacked constantly for quoting them. Yeah, I didn't make this stuff up. I'm not that creative.
I get that constantly from different government bodies and that, right? Well, that's good, Ron. That's your opinion. I said, it's not my opinion. They wrote it down.
Yeah.
Right? Well, that's still your opinion then. We don't know what you're talking about. Have a nice day. It is absolutely incredible. I gave a Tennessee, I don't know when it was, 2-3 years ago, someone in Tennessee brought forward a paper or something asking to rescind anything Agenda 21 in Tennessee or in a county there. Yeah. So I took it and I read it at my local in front of the local council. And they're still in total denial. And they just sat there like deer in the headlights. Now, I'd been after the CAO about it. They know I've been pushing on them. So what are they going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? So then they came out with this statement in the newspaper that they're going to move rapidly forward with our common future, sidestep the Agenda 21 situation. So I went back to council, and I asked them, why would a council in a small municipality in Ontario, Canada, feel the need to move rapidly forward with our common future? Was written way back in 1987. What is the urgency of this? And they just again sat there like deer in the headlights. And then I asked them, I said, how many of you councillors have read Our Common Future? None. Mm-hmm. You know, we are moving forward in a state of total ignorance because our CAO, city manager, he sets the agenda for the council, and we just do basically what he says because we're too ignorant to look at anything, right? Yeah. And I think a lot of it is being moved forward through sheer willful ignorance.
That and money. It's the money that's driving it. There's billions and billions of dollars behind these NGO groups, these planning groups, the grant money. Let me just kind of go through, just here. I'm sure the same thing has happened in Canada, but how it happened in the United States, where, first of all, the Southern Poverty Law Center said this in an attack against me and others. Agenda 21 is not a treaty. It has no force of law, no enforcement mechanisms, no penalties, and no significant funding. It's not even a top-down recommendation, seeking instead to encourage communities around the world to come up with their own solutions to overpopulation, pollution, poverty, and resource depletion. It is a feel-good guide that cannot force anyone anywhere to do anything at all.
Right. But if you, the council at the local level, do not implement this, when you say come up with their own ideas, if you've ever gone through the vision plans and the forward plans of all these communities anywhere on the planet, all they are is a freaking template that they fill in information for their own area, right? And the suggestions are being there for bike paths and watershed programs and all that kind of stuff. So, but it comes, like you said, down to the money, because what happens down at the local level is that if the local level doesn't do what it's told to do, then funding is withheld.
Sure.
Okay, and they will hurt the local community if they don't implement what they're told to implement. So money part is absolutely correct.
Absolutely correct. Here's what they did. When George H.W. Bush signed it for the United States, saying, "Yeah, this is policy that we think is good for America," that opened up the bureaucracy to begin to move. Those same NGO groups, these non-governmental organizations, private organizations, that helped write it at the international level, then went into our federal bureaucracy and into Congress. They got agencies like EPA and the Department of Transportation and HUD and others to put programs together, particularly put grant programs together. These grant programs have the strings in them. If a community takes the grant money, then the strings attached come that says, things like, this is how you're going to cut back on your carbon footprint. You're going to cut back on energy use. You're going to use this kind of building materials. You're going to have to put bike paths in. You're going to have to put high-rise buildings in. You're going to have density controls, on and on and on like this. And you take the money, you've got to do that. And so then, after they went through the federal government, and of course Bill Clinton put together the President's Council on Sustainable Development, which had the same NGOs on it and business leaders on it, and the whole purpose of that was to implement Agenda 21. For these guys to say that it has no enforcement capability, there's where it came from. They made it official policy of the government. Then the same NGOs went into the state legislatures, and they got the state legislatures to pass laws that said every community needs to do a comprehensive development plan. Now you've got counties and cities saying, what the heck is a comprehensive development plan? The same NGOs arrive and say, don't worry, got everything right here in a box for you. We've even got the money for you. And that's the way it got from the international level into the local communities and became law of the land.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's because even the United Nations said, or their main bodies said, that they could never implement this plan from top down. It would never fly. It has to be implemented at the local level. And that goes back, and I keep bringing that up, and I'm going to keep bringing it up till people understand it. But the 1950 Senate hearings with Warburg, James Warburg, I guess son of Paul Warburg, who set up the fiat currency, states specifically in 1950, we will have world government by consent or by conquest. What you're witnessing here is the consent of world government in the West, because they can't take it by conquest. It wouldn't fly. They start dropping bombs in Canada, they're not going to fly. Australia, not going to fly. America's not going to fly. So they don't have that choice of conquest. They only have the choice of lighting up the White House with a colorful band, and to use that to get consent through psychological means. We just have to come to terms with that. But I mean, Warburg said they would have world government. He also said we can't have it as long as there are two major opposing powers. That's why the Iron Curtain came down. That's why the Berlin Wall came down. And then after that, he said we also have one other problem. We need a mechanism. Okay, we need a mechanism, a global mechanism. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but this is the gist of it. We need a global problem that only can be solved with a global solution. And that is what spawned the environment movement. It had nothing to do with trees or water or fish or anything else.
It's simply a mechanism. Came out and said that the environmental movement, that issue, global warming and all that, is the key to making all this happen, because Americans wouldn't give up their liberties because we were told that socialism was a better idea. We rejected that. But when they started saying, well, you can have all the liberties you think you have, but if you don't have a planet to stand on, what good are they going to do for you?
Exactly.
We started throwing our liberties on the bonfire like a good old-fashioned book burning, and that is, that's the key. That's how they're getting us to do it, out of guilt and fear. They are getting us to give up our liberties.
And that came through the education system because, again, when I look back at history, their first crack at it was the League of Nations, and when they did that, it was, from what I've read anyways, I mean, Wilson was running around pounding the table. We got to sign. But from what I've read, it appeared, and it makes sense, that the American people at that time still had enough sense of history and why they fought for independence. And the idea of giving up any bit of sovereignty was off the table. And so they had to go back to the drawing board and get another depression and another war. And out of that came the United Nations. So pound the people into the ground until they submit to the idea that the United Nations is the only solution to world peace. And we haven't had any world peace since the end of the war, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely haven't, and we haven't had a victory over an enemy in a war since the United Nations was created.
That's right.
Whether it's Vietnam or North Korea or anything.
Now, Tom, here's a question for you, because I know you're a man of great study. Do you have any idea when America went from what it was founded as, a republic, to a democracy?
I've seen lots of speculation on it, and it seems that things began to really change after the Civil War. That our system began to be there's several amendments put on our Constitution that began to drag it down. The taking senators used to be appointed by the states as a representative of the state in the federal government, and the 17th Amendment we started electing senators instead. And that had a huge impact on, the states became forgotten. They were supposed to be equal, each state, it was the United States of America. And now we have the United State, basically. And that was a big change.
So you think it started that long ago, eh?
Yeah, I do.
I
think, that lots of things were done in the Civil War that turned the Constitution on its ear, and then of course you got into the 20s, the 30s, the creation of the Federal Reserve, and several other things that happened there that just took the power away from the people, from the states, and the central government has grown in power ever since, and now it's unrecognizable.
Yeah, because the republic is a word you rarely ever hear.
Yeah.
Anymore. So
democracy we keep hearing.
Yeah, they
democracy is a lynch mob.
Well, yeah. Well, when I looked up the word democracy, and I came up, this is an etymology, and when I looked up the word democracy, it seemed to have a root of Demetech or something, which simply meant to keep the commoners basically fighting amongst themselves, right? And that's why we have the right-left all the time, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a good thing. Democracy is not a good thing, people.
I like the example. In fact, I have a poster that says this: democracy is 3 wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It has. Yeah. Democracy is not good for people.
Yeah. And people say, well, what's the difference between democracy and a republic? Republic says that individuals have specific rights, and it's government's job to protect those rights. You're born with those rights, and it doesn't matter. I mean, this is what I find so funny, not funny, but sad, of all the minorities and so forth that are against conservatives and against what we advocate, because a republic says you have those rights, and no matter how big the lynch mob is, they can't take those rights away from you because they're yours, and it's government's job to protect that. In a democracy, majority rules no matter what, and so that's the easy way to take away people's rights.
But that's another word that has been rebranded, if you will. We went from republic to democracy, and the other, when you're talking about your individual rights, the government has a duty to protect. Those were your unalienable rights, right?
Yes.
Okay, so now I hardly ever hear that word anymore. Mm-hmm. The word used in the United Nations documents is inalienable. I hear so-called patriots in that using the word inalienable. Well, inalienable is the opposite of unalienable. Okay, inalienable, those are rights that can be given and taken, right? So people have to be aware of the language being applied upon them.
Well, one of the things that several people I know who speak on this issue have said is that unalienable is actually kind of mispronounced, that it's unalienable, so that your rights are unalienable.
That's
they can't
it.
put a lien on your rights.
That's exactly it. I screwed up. Apologize
no, I mean,
to
that's
everybody.
what most people say is unalienable.
No, unalienable. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's important. That's very important to get that right.
I mean, it's a whole different meaning, because I've seen some people say, well, the founders misused the word. They misspelled it. It's inalienable. Right. And they use that way. But no, if you understand it's unalienable, then government can't put any pressures on your rights like a lien.
Right. And everybody should look up lien too. But my neighborhood's getting to the point now where I don't expect it's going to be too long before I have an inspector come along and tell me that my grass is too short or too long, or I use too much water or not enough water. Well, they'll never say I use too much water or not enough water, but what's it like in the States now? I know that these people need jobs, and this is the other thing they do. They take away your manufacturing sectors so that America and Canada, for all intents and purposes, we produce nothing. So what do we put the people to work at? We put them to work in the bureaucracies, and we make up these goofy Agenda 21 rules, and then we hire people to go and write tickets to people for that. How much of that is going on in the United States now?
Well, very much. Very much of it is going on. First of all, I think we've just about passed the 50% mark, where 50% of the people are getting tax dollars in one way or another, whether it's a welfare program or a government bureaucrat. So the other 40 or 50% are, having to come up with the money to pay for all that. But we do have people going around checking on the height of your grass. We have or if grass is dead in your yard, violations for that. We have people being arrested, these smart meters being put on people's homes that people don't want, and people who oppose it are being arrested. We had a situation in California, they had that drought going on there, which is caused by a lot of these policies. There was a family that was fined $500 by the community because the grass in their yard had died. They said the reason it died was because the state said they would charge them $500 fine if they used water to water it.
So the old catch-22, right?
Yeah. Which fine do they pay?
Yeah, I mean, up here, I still smoke, and we went to pick up the belongings of my mother-in-law after she passed away, and we were coming home, and I said to my brother-in-law, I know you quit smoking, but it's okay. I'll roll the window down in the van. And it's amazing because, what I didn't know this was going on exactly at the time, but he said, well, yeah, my wife still smokes. But if you see a police car come up behind us, throw your smoke out and dump the ashtray. And I went, why? And he says, well, because I'll get a ticket. Now, why would you get a ticket? Well, this is a company truck, but it's your company. Well, yeah, but you're not allowed to smoke in company vehicles. Yeah. But I thought you bought this thing, right? So you tell me a cop can pull you over if you're having to smoke or someone else having to smoke in your van that you paid for, they're going to write you a ticket for $250. Yes.
Yeah, that's what they'll do. They they're working to try to get that in private homes. And the excuse, that you can't smoke in your own home is that if you have a worker come there, a repairman or something like that, to work in your home, then that's his workplace, and you've just polluted it. That's the argument that they use on that.
Okay, now that answers some questions, because I know they're talking about that up here even, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought, what would they use as an excuse? And you just gave it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
But and I don't know if you've looked into this, but when I look at North Korea, now this is a country that's supposed to be really hard on its people and has no human rights or whatever, and I can't remember what the main city is, Phnom Penh or something. But I looked at some videos of that, and all I saw, Tom, was Agenda 21.
Sorry.
They have this huge main street, and people are walking and driving bicycles. They have an underground transit system, and the only vehicles you see on the road are government vehicles and service vehicles. And when I look at Agenda 21, I know, they want you out of your private vehicle. And that's all you're going to be left with is your bicycle, your feet, and your transit. Do I still got you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it just freaked me out because that's just what it looked like to me. It looked like this is Agenda 21.
Let me give you. Let's just talk about Agenda 21 because about what it is and why we're so concerned about it and what we mean by this. Let me just give you some quotes from the people who are promoting this. First of all, the United Nations Biodiversity Assessment Report that came out about the same time as Agenda 21, basically to explain it, where they want to go with it. They reported on what they considered not sustainable. In other words, what we can't have, what we're not allowed to have, that would damage the environment. This includes ski runs, grazing of livestock, plowing of soil, building fences, industry, single-family homes, paved and tarred roads, logging activities, reservoirs, power line construction, and economic systems that fail to set proper values on the environment. In other words, capitalism. First of all, Agenda 21 is a major attack on free enterprise. That's the first thing of it, that top-down control. Every single community in this country now is working on some kind of what you mentioned before, a visioning plan. Usually it comes along with a term like 2050 or something like that. And the funny thing is, you can go on the internet and you can find Jamaica 2050, Dubai 2050. They are identically worded to in Omaha, they have Heartland 2050. There's another one in Florida. I mean, they're all over the country. Every community's got one of these. They're exactly the same language. And what they're talking about is controlling human activity. And they paint these beautiful pictures of kind of an 1800s era village that we all live close by. You don't have to drive a car. You can walk to work. You can walk to the store. But what they do is they set the term smart growth, they put basically an imaginary line around the community. And they say no activity will take place outside of that line. Now you've got a controlled area where people live. What happens in that controlled area? The population grows. And what happens when that happens? Well, you can't have single-family homes. There's no room for them. We need to have apartment buildings. Oh, the population continues to rise. Those apartment buildings aren't going to be enough. Now we need high-rise buildings. And this is what we call the pack and stack. And in that area, everything you think, do, and say is controlled. As you mentioned, a lot of people are renting now. Basically, there is no private property. There are rental units. That's about all you can afford. That's all you can do. And, people are just living on top of each other. Why do people try to get out of cities? Because they're full of crime, inefficiency, drugs, bad government, on and on. And that's their solution to us, to have us a healthy, happy world. Healthy for who? Oh, here's an example of what they mean by healthy. In San Francisco, there is what they call, at least a few years ago, the greenest government building in the country. They built this government building there, and the elevator only stops on every third floor. You know why? Because it's healthier for you to get out of the elevator and climb some stairs. That's what they mean by healthy, happier communities.
That is amazing.
Riding your bicycle, the same thing. Walking, the same thing. That's what they mean by it.
Yeah, like that was my biggest problem, was this development zone border, and that's a huge problem. because, like you said, they've corralled you, and you get frustrated talking to people, and we're always looking for new ways, and we'll get to that pretty quick here because you have some new ways to try to activate people and get them to shine the light on their elected officials and whatnot. But several years ago, after talking to people, it's like talking to rocks all the time. I was trying to figure this out a little bit, like you do, and I just happened to be up at a reserve, and I asked an Indian woman, they're a native woman, and it was a very simple question. Do you understand the plan for Whitey, meaning everyone who's not native? And she just looked at me and smiled and nodded her head. And I said, okay, well, why do you get it so easy? And it's like, just bounces off of Whitey's head. And she said, it's very simple. We lived through it. Mm-hmm. Now it's your turn. In other words, they took their land and they put them into confined areas or border zones, and they controlled everything that goes on inside that fenced area. Mm-hmm. And they've genocided their society, their cultures, and they have made them completely dependent on the state. And how has it worked out for the native people, folks? Not well. But this is the same basic plan that Agenda 21 is bringing to your community. You are now, theoretically, because of that development border zone, living on a reservation.
I've heard the same thing. Russell Means, who was the head of the American Indian movement back in the 70s, they're the ones that took over Alcatraz.
Right.
He's a very large man. He's so tall. But he says the same thing, that, welcome to our world, guys. This is what we live through.
Yeah.
And when you have that kind of control, just because you've got this area today doesn't mean you'll have it tomorrow, because they'll decide, well, we need it better this way. And that's the problem here. When you've got top-down control and nothing is in concrete, nothing is stable, then when they feel like it, when they see some other need for something, we'll just move them over here. And that's exactly what we're seeing happen here. And they do that with jobs. Well, we don't need those jobs anymore. Get rid of those. And we'll cut that. We don't want that kind of company in our community. And so that's what they do over and over and over again. There's another quote I want to share with you. There's a lady named Christiana Figueres.
Oh my goodness! Yes.
You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Executive Secretary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. She said this in 2012. She said, "Quote: What is occurring here is in the whole climate change process is the complete transformation of the economic structure of the world." I mean, can it be any clearer? The attacks on capitalism, the attacks on free enterprise, personal privacy, all that. Then just a couple of months ago, she said this: "This is the first time in the history of mankind that we are setting ourselves the task of intentionally, within a defined period of time, to change the economic development model that has been reigning for at least 150 years since the Industrial Revolution." Al Gore said in his book, Earth in the Balance, that we will have to go through a wrenching transformation to cleanse ourselves of the horrors of the 20th century Industrial Revolution. Let me remind you, the 20th century Industrial Revolution created indoor plumbing and electricity, all the comforts you have now, your washers, your dryers, your sewing machine, your range. Before that, you had to haul your own water in. You had to build a fire and a stove, all these things. The horrors of that. What they say over and over and over again is that we must learn to live on less. And, they're determined to make sure we do.
Well, if you lived in Ontario, Canada, I think you would be having some fun. You should come up for a bit. We have now our lieutenant governor, who is sitting in place of the Queen, who is the one that signs legislation into law, is a lady by the name of Elizabeth Dowdeswell. Now, Elizabeth Dowdeswell came from the UN. She is born in Canada, but she spent a lot of time with the UN. And we have a thing called Local Agenda 21 here on how to implement Agenda 21 really without telling anybody. They have all these books, on how to do this, but they never heard of it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But anyways, this lady who is now our lieutenant governor is in our local Agenda 21. The first forward is by Morris Strong, and the second forward is by Elizabeth Dowdeswell. So you can imagine the amount of environmental law that is about to come down on the shoulders of the people in Ontario, Canada. I mean, it's going to be bad.
Yeah, they, there's just no mercy on this, and what you think about, what you care about. One of the other things they use to now here, and I'm sure it's the same everywhere. But we have, and I'm sure you do too, local elected councils, county commissioners, city councils, and of course state legislatures. And they're, especially the city councils and the county commissioners are the closest government to us. It's supposed to have the most influence on us because that's where we can get to our elected officials and talk to them. You can sit down over a cup of coffee and talk to your councilman and say, Harry, this thing you're doing here is hurting me, and well, let me look into it. Today, what we're doing with the implementation of Agenda 21 is the creation of non-elected regional councils and regional governments. And now you have people who just don't care what's happening to you. And what you have your elected officials, you go to them, your elected officials who are supposed to represent you, and they'll say, well, gee, I don't have anything to do with that. You need to go down to the water board or to the, this council or that council, talk to them. Now you've got a bureaucrat who doesn't care what you think, and he just shuts the door on you. And so we're losing our control of our local government, and that's this wrenching transformation that's taking place. It's a dictatorship. And
there's nobody responsible.
Yeah.
Right? And I had a quote here. This says, exploiting the weak and well indoctrinated for the bureaucrat, the world is a mere object to be manipulated by him. And that's a quote from Karl Marx.
Oh.
And that's exactly what's going on here.
Sure. We had a case working with a lady in Dayton, Ohio. Her name's Jenny Granado. And Jenny's family owned a 150-year-old historic farmhouse. It was along a highway, and they decided they were going to, enlarge or widen the highway. And they had in their front yard bushes that went across the front. Her mother had a favorite magnolia tree that she had a swing under. She liked to sit underneath the swing and underneath the tree in the swing and enjoy herself. They part of the grant that they got from the Department of Transportation to widen this highway was a provision that they had to also put in bike paths. Well, this wasn't a bike path. This was a bike highway. It was wide. It wasn't something you would go out and see, on the weekends see the countryside with your children. This was designed specifically to become a highway for bicycles where we get people out of their cars. This bicycle highway went straight through Jenny's yard within 7 feet of her front door, rendering her property absolutely worthless. Her mother came outside when the bulldozers arrived unannounced, just in time to see them bulldoze her magnolia tree. She literally died of a heart attack at that moment. Jenny went to the county commissioners, and they said, well, golly, it's the Regional Planning Commission that did this, not us. You need to go talk to them. We don't have anything to do with it. She goes to the Regional Planning Commission, and they say, oh, no, your county commissioners, well, all we did was get the grant. We don't have anything to do with the implementation of it. This is what our government is becoming. You have absolutely no say. You are a pawn in the game, and this is why we oppose Agenda 21. It is totally anti-freedom, anti-liberty, anti-individual liberty and limited government, and that's why we oppose it.
This kind of breaks me up here. I just looked in the chat here for a second, Tom. I'm sorry, but Somebody says, buy Canadian-made goods. Oh, wait a minute, we don't make anything. And that is so sad. And I don't know how you get this through people's heads. They went through this national thing. Nationalism is bad, right? And they equated that with Hitler, right? Now Hitler was a nationalist, right? Look at what happened there. Well, folks, what I try to explain to people here in Canada, and it sits well with the people in the United States and Australia and anywhere else, is that first of all, both of our countries are basically empty. You have a small ring of on the outer perimeter of the United States with the major cities in that. There's a couple of cities inside, but mainly it's a perimeter, border towns, if you will. And the middle of America, for all intents and purposes, is empty. And the same thing with Canada. I mean, Canada is the second largest landmass country on the planet, and we have less than the population of the state of California. And you have all of these people running around, oh, we can't use water and we can't use electricity. Well, my question to people is, if we just saw it off, Tom, I used to say this about Canada, but I'm going to add America into this today. If we were to saw off Canada and America, and those were the only two land-based countries on the planet, and nothing else existed except ocean. The question then would be, could those 300 and what do you got, 310 there now in America, thereabouts? Yeah. We got a little under 40 million here, so it's 350 million people basically. Could those 350 million people survive and thrive on the landmass that we would call Canada and America? Could they survive and thrive? And the answer is unequivocally yes.
Absolutely.
There's nothing that we cannot manufacture, design, engineer, or grow for our population. No. Yet we grow nothing really. I mean, we grow food, but it's not our food anymore. It's chemical food. We don't manufacture anything of any amount. And we are basically drifting on the sea, and we have no control over our own boat. We got to get that control back. And you would find that your living standards would rise exponentially quickly.
Absolutely. We are seeing our living standards go down. Again, they talk about living on less. One of the things, in 2012, the UN held what they called Rio Plus 20. It was 20 years celebration of the implementation of Agenda 21, which they doesn't exist. And again, they had 40,000 delegates at this one. And one of the themes that they talked about over and over again was zero economic growth. Think about that. Zero economic growth. Now, Barack Obama is really good at this, but I go back to my analogy with Thomas Edison and Henry Ford and the Wright brothers. They want to make sure nothing ever upsets the apple cart again in their well-ordered society. And zero economic growth is the answer to that. We don't move in any direction. We just exist. And, that's the purpose of this.
That is the purpose. And then, see, I had a lady from the Ukraine, I think she was, when I was fighting or trying to explain to people how to fight these wind turbine farms and that. And they're still running off to this elected official, that elected official, and, explain to them, nobody's on your side, right? You're going to have to do something on your own. But that's what you were trained to do, is to run to someone else to fix your problem for you, because they've taken away your own capacity to do so. And I explained to them, in the old days, if somebody came into your neighborhood with a scam like this, your forefathers would explain to them that we get your scam, you're not welcome, and goodbye. And if you should come back here again, well, it's not going to be pleasant for you. That's how it used to be dealt with. That's when people had strong minds and strong spines, and both have been terribly weakened over the last 150 years or whatever. So people don't know how to deal with this sort of thing at all. So, we have watched I mean, it's amazing to watch right in front of our own eyes, is it not? The absolute decimation of our nations.
Who
With
would have thought when we were kids that that this was possible at all? It never would have even have occurred to us that we could have gone this far to absolutely destroy our culture, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, we're destroying ourselves through consent.
Yeah, yeah.
And we have to stop the consent
Yeah.
nonsense.
I think the first thing we have to do is get back control of the education system. I mean, I think that's the number one thing we have to do, because there are going to be fewer and fewer of us who remember and understand as time goes by. We're going to die off, and these guys are going to take over. And then there'll be no, how would you get it back at that point? Who would know to ask the question?
This is the thing. To get it back, we can still get this back without violence. We still have that opportunity, and it's such a simple solution. And if I may, I was just going to do this story really quick. And there are other examples of it. But where my folks came from in Quebec, which is just across the Ottawa River from Ontario, where I was born along the Ottawa River, but there's a small community there. It's the main community up and down the river on the French side, but it's not really French. It's French English. It's split pretty even almost. And so they had that town, the main town, and it's been there forever. And if you were English, Tom DeWeese, the Agenda 21 store would be in English, and my store I sell chapeaux, maybe in French. But that's the way it was. And then they passed legislation in Quebec, this language law that all signage had to be in French. And they went to that small community and they explained it to them. And the small community looked at them kind of, like, where are you coming from? Well, it was legislated. Now you have to change all your signs to French only. And the people said, I don't think so. You see, this is our community. And this is our signs, and this is the way we like it, because if we change all the signs to French only, what happens to our English people who have businesses here? Okay, it causes strife and chaos here. We don't want that. Everybody gets along just fine, so have a nice day and go away.
It works.
Well, they went away, and then I have this rule that I've learned over the years, and I call it my moral high horse rule. And that is, when you are right and you are right, and you plan on winning your fight, then you need to get up on moral high horse. But never get on your moral high horse if you don't plan on winning, because there's no point mounting the horse in the first freaking place. But if you plan on winning, get up on your moral high horse, because as far as I'm concerned, moral law will always trump legislated law. It's more powerful. But so they've been told no, and then they come back a while later and said, you haven't changed the signs. Well, no, we told you we weren't going to. Now, the people have already won. Now, I always say somebody has to blink in a stalemate. Mm-hmm. And if you're on your moral high horse, you got a better vantage point, and you already know you're not going to blink. So that puts them in a position, and we see this all the time. Then the language police came back and try a negotiation process where they said, well, okay, we'll make you a deal here and only here. You can still have your English signs, but they have to be in a very small font with a very big font above it. And the people again looked at them and said, I don't think so. Language police went away again and came back a third time. And I was actually out in Western Canada when this happened, and I saw it on the TV, and I almost freaked, because this is not a very big town. And I'm very well acquainted with it. And so they came back, and it was showing on the TV where the townspeople actually came out en masse and explained to them one last time it ain't going to happen, and basically showed them the exit to the town and told them don't come back. As far as I know, the signs are the way they've always been. And that's really all that has to happen, is we have to get our communities involved in this so that they can simply stand up and say no. No bureaucrat can override that.
I am starting to see some things like that happen. across. I keep calling myself the Pollyanna of our movement because everybody is hanging their heads and saying we've lost the republic and it's over and there's nothing we can do. I'm seeing people do things. This group ICLEI, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. ICLEI was one of the organizations that helped write Agenda 21 at the UN level, and then they made it their mission to implement it in every single community in the world. And back in about 2010, 2011, they had 650 American cities as members of ICLEI. These are communities that pay dues to them. You got them in obviously I know you have them in Canada as well.
Yes, we do.
Pay them dues, and they bring in software programs, training programs, seminars, newsletters, everything they need to indoctrinate your local government to implement Agenda 21. And started in 2011 in Carroll County, Maryland. And since that time, we have had over 150 cities end their membership in ICLEI. The head of ICLEI USA told an associate of mine, not knowing who he was, that they are terrified of our movement because they can't get new communities to join them, and they don't know what to do with us. They're terrified of how to fight back, which of course made my day as soon as I heard that. These people are not omnipotent. They are not all that powerful. They're terrified of us as we're getting the message out. I get every day, I'm getting notes, calls, letters from people saying that they have stood up to this, or they want to know what can they do. The one thing that's happening that never happened before, it started about 3 years ago, is I'm starting to get calls from elected officials saying, I just got elected. I know what this is all about. I want to stop it. What do I do? And I'll talk to them, and I'll give them some ideas. I've had some of them call me back and say, okay, I did all that. Now what do I do? And this never happened before, and we have an opportunity to tear this down and get rid of it. But we do have to have, just like your people in your story, we've got to have people turn out like that. You've got to stop looking at your feet in defeat and say, oh, there's nothing we can do. We've lost the republic. No, we haven't. It's still there. It's rusting. It's still there. And we can move up, and we can turn this around.
Yeah, it's a psychological war, and we just need to use psychology to win it. And the one thing about us compared to them is we're not afraid. You see, because we are the honest good guys, if you will. Okay, why do they not come out and why aren't there banners on your street? We've just implemented another arm of Agenda 21 into your town. Yay! Why did they not show you this? Because it's not good for you, yes. Right?
Yeah,
and so they're actually hiding in their council chambers and that. They're frightened to death.
Yeah.
And what I do, because I go to council and I ran for mayor and so on and so forth, is that, if I'm in a store or something, my elected officials, if they're there, it's pathetic to watch. It's worse than grade school. I don't have to say anything. I have to say nothing. They spot me, and all of a sudden they're ducking and diving and hiding. It's amazing. I was at a meeting on how to, and they had the realtors there, the mayors there, and everything. It was put on by the Housing Corporation here in Canada, explaining. I was sitting there, and I'm going, this is Agenda 21. There's the facilitator. There's your little consensus tables, right? Yada yada yada. The program, eh, Tom?
Sure.
So the head of one of the representatives from Mortgage and Housing was there, and I said, this is Agenda 21, and she said, oh, I don't think so. Do you? And I said, it's obvious, and I know what you're up to, but that meeting wasn't announced in the newspaper. I just caught wind of it. And I went down, and there was a mayor sitting there, and I had my video camera with me. And I said, watch this. This is amazing. I'm going to point the camera at this guy, and if he turns around and sees me, he's immediately going to drop his head and turn it to the left. And she goes, that's not possible. I said, watch this. right? And he saw me with the camera, and he did exactly that. I see him in the grocery store. He just bails, man. They all bail. And what I'm trying to explain is that that's just me, folks. Okay. What we need to do is everyone needs to let their so-called elected officials know that you know. Okay, and then these people are screwed. Okay, because once everyone knows and the officials know that everyone knows, then they have no power whatsoever. None.
They will. Their tactic is to ridicule us and try to discredit us. That's what the Southern Poverty Law Center has done with me. They do it over and over again, and we quote them. They call us the nuts, and. My tactic has always been to come right straight back at them with the documents and everything. Come on, say something, and they don't say anymore. They just want to ridicule. But the thing is, if you do like you've done, if you get out there in front of them and show people you won't back down, that you've got the goods, that you're going after them, they don't know what to do with that. The opposition that they're feeling now is new. It did not exist on the level it's at 5 years ago.
No, it's really changing.
Yeah, the American Planning Association, which is the largest in here planning group, they immediately, when we started to really gain some ground, they set up a boot camp to train their planners how to deal with us. They came out with a document called Glossary for the Public. This is a hysterical document. It tells this is the opening line to it. Given the heightened scrutiny of planners by some members of the public, what is said or not said is especially important to building support for planning. And then they go through here and talk about it being just a conversation with the community. We don't take a stand on anything. You are just deciding here what's going to happen here. Then they go through a list of words to not use anymore because this generates suspicion from some citizens. This includes collaboration and consensus, Delphi technique, density, livable, localized planning, and even includes growth, stakeholders, and sustainability.
Yeah,
I have joked.
I know, and the public needs to notice all of this stuff. And when you said density, our mayor of Mississauga here now, I don't think she's the mayor anymore, but she was the mayor for like 100 years. And she was a runner-up on global mayors or international mayors or something. And people, if you want to look up that, it's important. Just look up global mayors or international mayors, and you will find that all the mayors are completely involved in this thing through the international system, and that is being pushed down through to your local level that way. We just need, all we need to do, folks, is so simple, is just keep shining the light on them. If you are speaking truthfully and honestly, and they are obviously not, then guess what? They don't have a choice. They can't stand and discuss anything with you. They have to run. The time of this ridiculing is over. They're still using the same old tactics because they only got so many templates to use. When we were fighting wind turbines up here, it was always NIMBYism, right? NIMBYism. You're NIMBYs because you don't want us to save the environment because you're so greedy that you care about your own property or your own health or whatever. You're just NIMBYs. Now I see them using the same language when they're going into neighborhoods now, and because they've changed all the planning acts, right, Tom, so that you can build high density anywhere you want, basically now. And so now they're moving into fairly well-to-do suburbia or neighborhoods in our major cities now, and decimating their property values, just like they decimated property values with wind turbines. And when the people come to speak, like, this isn't even in the planning code. Well, we've changed the planning code when you weren't looking, so now we can dump in high density right beside your beautiful home, and there's nothing you can do about it. Now they've done the same thing. Anybody that's stepping forward to speak out about high density in their neighborhoods are being called NIMBYs.
Yeah. The argument the attack they always make against us is that if we oppose all this wonderful planning that they're doing, then we are just paid shills for big corporations. That the oil companies, the Koch brothers, all this are funding us. And there's an organization, there's a website called treehugger.com, my favorite. And they did this big expose on our fight against Agenda 21, particularly focusing on me. And the bottom line was that I was secretly funded by Exxon and the Koch brothers. I have never received a dime from either one of those groups. In fact, I wrote to the chairman of the board of Exxon, and I said, I'm taking your heat. Where's my check? I never even heard from them.
I know. I've gotten that before too, and I haven't seen my check yet.
Yeah. I'm not opposed to it. I just didn't get it. But the funny thing about it is that Exxon is funding the other side in massive amounts. I hardly know. Some of our groups I work with used to get some funding from them. It was all just a pittance compared to what the other side was getting. But now we don't get anything because Exxon's scared to death to give us any money. It's green mail or blackmail, and so they give it to them. But so are they lackeys of Exxon?
When you bring up Exxon, a lot of these so-called accidents, I wonder how many of them were actually planned events because, in order for you to bow down to the environment, we have to wreck the environment. We have to show cause that you should be concerned about the environment. So when I found out that Rockefeller Group was involved in Exxon, and and I look at the circumstances of the accident, doesn't really make any sense. I wonder if some of these things haven't been contrived accidents in order to get the media play they require to show people that oh my God, the environment's going to implode and we're all going to die kind of thing, in order to get people to accept their propaganda and their agenda.
There could be some truth to that. British Petroleum has been in history one of the worst companies that promotes sustainable development and the whole environmental movement, to the point that I refuse to ever buy British Petroleum gas. I will walk before I will pull into one of their stations. Well, of course, they're the ones behind that big oil spill a few years ago down in the Gulf of Mexico. Mm-hmm. So what you're saying could well be because they are definitely in their camp.
Actually, when I look at that oil spill they had in the Gulf of Mexico, and I don't spend a great deal of time about that. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, right? No. I just look at evidence and I make my own conclusions to it. And some of this stuff does have the markings of a possible event, a planned event. And I don't have any proof of it, but when I understand what the Agenda 21 is about and what the environmental movement is about, problem reaction solution, that if we cause a problem, then we need a reaction. We get the reaction through the media and government and this and that and the other thing and the NGOs, which brings us to a solution. And the solution always seems to be the removal of more of our rights to save what we have never hurt. Yeah. Because I've never met anyone who is not an environmentalist. Yeah. Not environmentalist as in Agenda 21 environmentalist, but I mean a real environmentalist, which is you live in your environment, and do you get up in the morning with the intent to harm your environment? I don't think so.
And it's exactly that point, is they know that, and they know we want clean water, we want clean air, we don't want to live in garbage, and they use that image and that fear against us. Mm-hmm. And the incredible thing is that so many of their so-called solutions are actually damaging the environment. Mm-hmm. The Forest Service that refuses to move dead trees off the floor of the forest. Uh-huh. There is 10 foot or more kindling on the floor of the forest that they refuse to move, saying, well, that's just natural. Like man is not part of the ecology. And what this does is, first of all, these trees rot, and they draw termites, which come in and affect other trees there. And when the forest does catch on fire, you see the reports all the time, they burn hotter than ever in history because that kindling is on the floor. And so here's one example of so-called environmental solutions to something that is damaging to the environment.
Yeah, on the other hand, they're selling people stewardship when in fact they're not doing any.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so cause a problem. We need a problem, cause one.
Yeah.
Right? And so I really feel bad for folks who, the UN says, 80%. Apparently, I was just reading a report. Canada, which is again empty, is apparently one of the highest city-dwelling countries on the planet, if not the highest. They've run everybody off out of the rural areas, and like you said, logging and stuff like that. They've shut down the logging, they've shut down the mining. These communities up farther north of me, who were thriving communities for forever, have been destroyed and shut down. And now those people, when you don't have work, where do you go? You go to where you can find work. So they ended up in the cities. So they're not in the city because they want to be in the city. They were in the city because they've been driven into the city. But the UN always has this brilliant idea of speaking backwards all the time. Yeah.
The amazing thing, of course, we have this thing called the Wildlands Project. And that was created. Basically, I actually, the other day, I found the original document for the Wildlands Project, produced by one of the most radical, violent environmental groups called Earth First, and Dave Foreman, who basically wrote it. And the quotes from this guy are unbelievable, what he says. And the Wildlands Project called for the rewilding of 50% of all the land in every single state back to the way it was before Christopher Columbus came here. And the idea was to herd people into the cities and out of the rural areas. And eventually that became the basis for the Biodiversity Treaty. So then it became international law. The ravings of a lunatic became international law or policy. And, we would tell people this about the wilderness. I think, oh, come on, how do you do that? How do you herd people off the land? Well, just you said, you shut down the timber industry, you control water, you control the land, you shut down the ranchers, and you make it impossible for them to live there. They have no way to stay, and so they leave. And you'll find the wetlands policies. We have a major policy being pushed across the country in banning septic tanks in rural areas.
Oh, well, we got that going on.
Yeah, that's a major thing. Here, the governor of Maryland talks about it as being a way to protect the Chesapeake Bay, even though there's not a single piece of evidence that shows that a septic tank does any damage to the environment whatsoever. But they make it up. They make it up as they go along, and people go who don't know, they're not scientific, they don't watch, they don't read, they go, oh, God, well, yeah, we can't do that, and off we go again.
Yeah, it's I don't know how many people study the Rockefeller Foundation, but I really encourage people to do so. If you read Rockefeller documents, and then you go and read UN documents, you're reading the same stuff. But what they do is they come up with scenarios, possible scenarios, and then that creates possible problems of which we need solutions to. And one of the ones that I read, which I think is a good way to show what they're up to, is that one is a scenario in India near the Ganges River. And they're talking to a young girl there who is gazing at the river, and the river is all pristine and clean and everything. And she's basically saying, I understand why I can't go to the river. I can view the river, but I can't go to the river because of what happened. And people used to wash clothes in it and bathe in it, and they damaged the river. And now the river has been put back to its natural state. And so I can appreciate why I can't go to the river. And this is the kind of thing that with these trail systems and that, It's in Agenda 24, and that you 84. You will be able to go to nature, but not on your terms, on
Yeah,
their terms.
this is an interesting point because you have a lot of people, as you mentioned, we're all environmentalists. Well, there are people who really consider themselves to be environmentalists. They love to get out in the forest. They love to go on the trails and all that. What they don't understand is when all these policies are put in place, they will not be allowed to do that. And we're seeing it's implementing, piece by piece as we go along anyway. So these guys who love nature, love to get out in it, hey, brother, you're going to be in New York City. That's where you're going.
Well, New York City. Have you watched that video yet? Survival of the Spaceship Earth.
Don't believe I have.
Okay, it's on my blog. My blog is CanadianTruths.wordpress.com, and you can just punch that in there. Survival Spaceship Earth. I cut it a little bit. I knocked maybe 20 minutes off of a filler and whatnot, but it came out just prior to the 72 Conference on Human Environment from Stockholm. And it was a movie that was made, and they actually put these guys in as actors, and they are actors. David Rockefeller, Morris Strong, Barbara Ward, Margaret Mead, René Dubois, and a few other nutcases. I think the guy from the EPA was there, maybe. But it is if you watch that video and you don't get involved, you don't understand what the environmental movement's about after watching that, you'll never get it. But very few people have ever seen that movie. But it is so in your face. But, you remember Paul Ehrlich, and he was at 72 Stockholm. What they're selling you, people, is a false utopia. Okay? They paint it as a pretty picture for you. Nice walk paths. You don't need a car to go to work or go to the store, and the park is right there, yada, yada, yada. But in that movie, that's what I brought up in Survival Spaceship Earth, they do have a thing on there about New York, and it is very, very negative. A very negative report on New York, and you have to understand the context of it. And so they're building you this utopian, false utopia of this city life where they grow food in the towers. You never have to go out in the country. We don't have to even farm anymore. We'll grow all your food. All your water will be recycled in the building that you live in. Zero emission buildings and that. But the reality of it is, and Paul Ehrlich, who was at 72 Stockholm. And I didn't know this till, maybe 6 months ago, but the movie Soylent Green, okay, and movies are predictive programming, make no mistake about it. But that movie, Soylent Green, depicts New York City in the same basic time frame as your 2050 and all this kind of thing, right? And it's not the utopia they're selling you. The movie Soylent Green is much, much closer to the reality of what's coming than this utopian dream that they're selling you. But when I looked at where the movie Soylent Green came from, it came from a book called Make Room, Make Room. And who wrote the foreword in that book? Paul Ehrlich. Okay, so, what you think's being built around you is not what is being built around you. And you are going to suffer desperately if we allow them to continue on this road that they've got us on.
The evidence is everywhere. Their words are there. We have the individual is going to have to take a back seat to the collective. The free enterprise has got to go. All these things, they're there in their words. They're doing it. And then they just, as soon as we bring it up, they deny it. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. I know. And ridicule anybody who comes up with it. What we need to make sure, as people come away from today's program, I think, about what Agenda 21 is the, you're familiar with the 3 E's of Agenda 21. Their logo, that's always these 3 connecting circles. You'll see it in all their documents in one way or another that they put out. And the three E's of it are economic prosperity, social equity, and ecological integrity. Those are the three E's. Well, so economic prosperity basically are public-private partnerships between business and government and business being equal in what they do. Well, that's right out of the Mussolini fascist playbook. Especially in a free society, it's government's job to protect businesses, to make sure that they can prosper and grow and so forth, but not to be equal to them, not to have the power of eminent domain and put policies in place. But that's what this means. And ecological integrity is the excuse for the whole thing, as we said before, that scare us to death on the environment, and so you'll accept anything. But social equity, social justice, this is the key to Agenda 21. If you don't understand that, you don't understand Agenda 21. Social justice means redistribution of wealth. And when we're talking about, you're saying there's no industry in Canada and hardly any in America anymore. Where's it gone? It's gone to other countries. That's redistribution of wealth. If we're damaging the environment with our smokestacks in the United States and in Canada, doesn't it damage the environment if it's done in third world countries and Africa?
Well, of course not, Tom. Tom, you're starting to sound like a conspiracy theorist. My God. Morris Strong, who brought us Agenda 21, is in China, where they built 500 friggin' coal plants without scrubbers on them.
Yep.
And proudly proclaim no one can compete with us as we have the cheapest labor. Now your fuels are being dragged from your lands and sent to fuel their power plants.
Yep.
So we got to wrap our brains around a little bit of this.
Yeah.
That's
how hypocritical, how absolutely outrageous all their lies are. Everything based on, if we talk out against Agenda 21, we just want to pave the earth. I've heard that before, that that's what we want to do, is just pave the earth. That's all we care about. And they just want to protect the environment. It is a lie, an absolute lie, that any of this has anything to do with protecting the environment. That's the excuse. And anybody who's sitting there saying, well, we got to protect the environment, you have been duped, and you are a pawn in this game.
I had a lady on the show, I don't know, probably 3 years ago now or something, who took a environmental planning course or something. Like, she was like 40-ish or whatever, wanted to change career or whatever. So she went to university, and so she's much older than the students. And she thought it was completely freaky because they're doing environmental planning and that, right? And she said, what they would do is just come up with a problem that doesn't even exist. They would make up they were being taught to make up problems that don't exist. But once the problem, even though it doesn't exist, has been identified, then there must be a solution drawn up to deal with that problem. Now, she said that she was looking at this going, this is whacked, right? Mm-hmm. This is nuts. So I'll just get through this, and when I get out in the real world, it'll be better. And she said when she got out in the real world, it all of a sudden made what was going on in the class look pretty easy compared to what she ran into out there. And that's exactly what they do, and that's what the Rockefeller Foundation and the UN and all those groups do. The NGOs, everybody, they identify non-existing problems and then feed it through the media, which is all on board. Get everybody hyped out. Oh my God, we got to do something about this. Well, that we thank you, because we already had the solution before the minute we came up with the problem. And we came up with the problem because this is what we want you to believe or do. A total manipulation of the good people of our lands.
It comes together. One of the terms they use is a precautionary principle, where even though a problem doesn't exist, well, let's make sure it never does. So we won't do this. And
they use that precautionary principle on both sides, right? Now, when people are being run out of their homes because of wind turbines or whatever else they're doing out there, and say our health is bad, and you're supposed to use a precautionary principle, right? And then they turn the precautionary. Well, we are using the precautionary principle. We're putting up the wind turbines to fight global warming, even though we have no evidence of global warming. But we use the precautionary principle for that. You need to use in what do you call it? Science to prove to us that you're actually being harmed. So they use that precautionary principle on both sides to get what they want and to protect themselves against you.
It just means everybody stands around paralyzed.
Yes.
Can't move in any direction.
Yes.
So, and now we end up, because of all this, we have the Rust Belt in Detroit and Akron and Canton and these areas, Youngstown and Ohio, where all these what were once great steel factories are gone, and all that. We should never have a Rust Belt in a free society. But and again, where are those steel mills? Are they protecting the environment by shutting them down? No, they built them in China.
Well, that's exactly it. You will find an awful lot of your ex-presidents and our prime ministers and that who are heavily invested over in China.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
While they're telling you to protect the environment, they don't give a damn about the environment. This has never been about the environment. It is simply about control. I
think that's the most important message we can put out today. That is absolutely correct.
Well,
they don't care.
It's tended to this went really fast, Tom. I really enjoyed this, and we really didn't. We did what we've done today, folks. Is me and Tom. I think. Had a nice cup of coffee together and got to know each other. I have several people here in the chat saying that was an excellent show, but Tom is coming back, correct?
Absolutely.
Yes, I would love to have you back, because what I'd like to do sometime in the not too distant future, and now that we've, the folks here know you well now, and that from our conversation, is come back and get deeper into this and open the phone lines, because I'm a firm believer that you can't do it, and I know I can't do it, but we do what we do because something has to be done, and if we have to be the canaries or whatever, so be it. But the participation of the people is the only thing that is going to offer your children, your grandchildren, or their children a future.
One of the things I want to talk about in the future is what we're doing about it. And last year I had the privilege to come to Canada with the Ontario Landowners Association, and we created with some folks from Australia a international property rights association. And I am working right now, I hope to release it this week, a statement of principles for a worldwide property rights movement that we've got a new symbol to go with it, and we hope to get property rights groups all over the world to begin to sign on to this and begin to promote these ideas and make property rights a major issue, because you cannot implement Agenda 21 without diminishing private property rights. And
well, I would go a step further on that, Tom, and I believe that we need to go beyond property rights, and we have to get back to land rights, because property rights are not really land rights at all. And I really think that we need to. I'm a firm believer that when you're born in a country. And this is the problem, is that we don't really have the proper stake in our countries. And I'm a firm believer that our forefathers came here for the right of land, and they were kind of hoodwinked to a point. They did have the right of land for a while till it was taken away and was turned into property. But without the actual ownership of land, you really don't have the stake required in your country to make people understand their commitment to their country. Mm-hmm. If I was prime minister, the first thing I would do would be set up some kind of a situation where everyone that is born on these lands is immediately deeded a chunk of property, and that connects you to those lands tight. and you will defend your property rights, not your property rights, but your land rights at that point. You won't allow some pencil neck to come in and tell you your grass is too long.
You'll see in this document we released it. We talk about private property ownership includes lands, homes, businesses, possessions, papers, fruits of one's labors, and their ideas.
Yeah.
And, so we cover it all.
Yeah, and can you? I put your site in the chat here, but if you would just, we've got a few minutes left, not too many, but if you could just shout out your site name and address.
Yeah, it's our group is American Policy Center, and the website is AmericanPolicy.org. And we've got there on the site, I've got a long archive of many years of writing articles about these issues and personal privacy and many education, many other things. And by the way, I did write a book that's entitled "Now Tell Me I Was Wrong." And what it is a compilation of articles I wrote over a 15-year period where everybody said, nah, that can't be. And now they're finding out that it is, hence the title, Now Tell Me I Was Wrong. So that's available there. My newsletter, the DeWeese Report, we put out every month, and you can get it online. You can subscribe to it there. So
yeah, it's funny. I went to see some lawyers about some stuff, and I know I'm tagged pretty hard. And, they looked at me and they listened to me and they said, they did with that blank stare I'm used to, said, we can't help you. And I actually had one lawyer say to me, he said, Ron, you know what you need to do? I went, what? He said, you need to write a book. Sooner the better, right? And a lot of that comes that, I even had a policeman said that he would vote for me because he thought I had it in me to make this a better place and turn a better country, which I explained to him, I can't do it myself. Step up, quit being behind us and step up with us, because until you step up with us, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to be able to get this where we need to get it to. This idea of we're behind you stuff just tells us that you're still weak of mind and spine. If you're not willing to stand up beside, then that makes you part of the problem, not part of the solution. So people just need to go look in the mirror and look at that reflection back and understand you are the solution.
And we don't need everybody. We need a dedicated few who will speak up, and they can have a huge impact. Just because your neighbors won't join you doesn't mean you don't. You shouldn't take off and go after this if you're so inclined. We need everybody.
We don't need everybody, but we do need a dedicated group of people, and it really, honestly, doesn't take that many.
Scares them to death. That's what I love to see, is when we do show up. In very quickly, if I got time, I'll tell you a very fast story on this whole thing about consensus. Down in South Carolina, there was yet another group that pops up with another plan to lock away 10,000 acres of land. 100 property owners showed up and started asking. They had the usual facilitator, started asking them questions. What do we do? Who are you people? Where'd you come from? Who funds you? They adjourned the meeting. 2 weeks later, they tried to have it again. The same 100 property owners showed up. Within 5 minutes, they're having a debate across the room on liberty. And whereupon the chairman of this organization gets up and says, I'm adjourning this meeting because this meeting has reached the wrong consensus. Perfect.
And that's it, Tom. That's the whole thing. It doesn't take that many. It just needs people who do not wander around in fear.
Yes.
Okay? Once you remove the fear and you understand the fight we're in, things get very calm. And they can't stand that calmness because they know there's no fear. And without the fear, they have no power over you.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant. And I love it when I see it. I just really, truly do. Because I've seen them run before, too, out of meetings. We're adjourning. Bye. See you later.
Yeah, right.
I've done that at planning meetings
Shut
and everything.
the doors. Yeah.
Just two people in a planning meeting. They packed up everything, took off. Mm-hmm. And we didn't say anything. They just knew we knew what they were up to. That's all it took, right?
I think laughter's a powerful tool too. You just start laughing at them.
Yes. Yeah, keep it light, and that's one thing I really don't want people to do is get so angry that they do something stupid. We don't have to do anything stupid. We have to play this smart. and we do have the upper hand. So, Tom, I want to really thank you for this show. I had somebody I was going to bring in because I wanted to talk to you, but it didn't happen. So hopefully we get you back in the not too distant future.
Okay, absolutely.
Thank you everyone for listening. That's been great. Thanks to Tom. Thank you UCYTV for giving me this time, and we shall see you again. Take care. Bye-bye.